Shabbat Shalom, this is Yalak. It's May 28, 2016. My title here for this lesson is Right Before Your Eyes. And this is a part of the New Testament is Fake series, Right Before Your Eyes. And thank you for listening. This is a common sense kind of lesson, as usually the lessons in this series are more common sense kind of approach to seeing that the so-called Messiah, 2,000-year-old Messiah in the New Testament, is fake. So right before your eyes is just dealing with the truth that's in the Bible that's really right before our eyes, but we just don't see it. You know, it's just, I'm just sitting here just thinking that there are so many things in the Bible that we just don't see, even though it's right before our eyes. So much truth. And you know the kind of feeling you have when you realize something, even though you've been reading a certain passage for years. And you're like, man, I never saw that before, I never understood that before, or I didn't see it that way before. Yet it was always there. Sometimes you find two different scriptures, and they seem to conflict with each other, but they're not. It's just your understanding isn't at that place where you can understand what it's saying, so it takes more research, more looking into it. And finally, when you understand it, you realize, oh, there's actually no problem between the two passages. They don't actually contradict, but so-and-so is the explanation, and it makes sense. But you didn't have that understanding all along, and you know, it's just coming to you that the truth was never absent from the pages. It was always in the scrolls. From the moment the first scribes and prophets spoke and penned it in ancient times, and it got recorded, it was always just the truth. But it's just us who didn't see it. We didn't understand it, right? And so in some kind of way, you know, in some sense, we're a little bit blind sometimes to spiritual truth. And we really are. Some things can just be right in front of your eyes and you just don't see it. Now, let's look here from the New Testament with one of the verses that Jesus said in Matthew 18 verse 19, where he's saying, if you ask anything. And just think in terms of what the title of this lesson is saying, and it's right before your eyes. This verse here is showing that this Jesus is fake and the things he's saying. But even though his fakeness is plain right before our eyes, we just kind of blind to it and just can't see it. Because for years I've read this verse as well from when I was a child in the Christian church, and I was just so blind to the reality that this just wasn't happening. Just wasn't happening. So Matthew 18 and verse 19, it says, again I say, Jesus is speaking, again I say unto you, that if two of you shall agree on earth as touching anything that they shall ask, it shall be done for them of my Father which is in heaven. Alright, and so, you know, the simple, you know, explanation of that is that he's saying if you just come together and you agree, you know, and you just agree. I mean, we don't have to complicate it. A couple of you come together, you agree, you're asking his name, you're going to get it. Because the Father will give it. But right before our eyes, all along, especially, right before my eyes in a Christian church from when I was a small boy, it was just right before my eyes that this cannot possibly be true, making Jesus a liar, because he's not doing what he says. But even though it's right before my eyes, I just lived as if I couldn't see it. So I was blind to the reality of this not being the truth, coming from Jesus' mouth, and continued to live in a deception of believing in Jesus. Obviously, if you come together and you agree with a couple of people and you pray about stuff, Jesus should be doing it based on what he said, or his Father at least. And if he's the mediator, then he should be saying to the Father, yeah, I'll let that happen because I already gave my word, I promised them, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't happen. You pray for sick people and they still die and so on. You can add all kinds of stuff to that list. It just doesn't happen, right? Yeah, sure, some people are going to say, but I prayed and this and that happened, and so sure. But what about the other things that they're telling you did not, that they're not telling you about that didn't happen? It don't matter if they want to show how something happened and say, well, this proves Jesus is real and he answers prayer. That don't matter to me, because he said anything that you ask. So if 5 happened, then the other 2, 3, 5, 10,000 things that didn't happen is a greater problem. Even if it was one thing that didn't happen, it's a greater problem than the 5 that did happen. Then you ask me, well, how do you explain the ones that did happen? That's your problem. You explain that. Because it don't matter what explanation you give, or I try to guess to help you deal with that part. By the time I ask you, why didn't the other one not happen, you still got a big problem. Explain to me why that didn't happen. So in some ways, we're kind of blind. In some sense, we're blind. We can't see. Spiritual truth is kind of funny, where you can look at a text for years sometimes, or for months, and not see the thing, and one day it just happens. It just comes to you. One day it just comes to you. Spiritual stuff is funny like that. And then it's also fun in a way where you're just looking at it, and you just never see it. Right? Even though it's right before your eyes. Now, let me paint a picture for you here now. That's New Testament stuff with Jesus. Let me paint a picture from Old Testament to show you something now, how this would look really bad in the Old Testament. Now, if the God of Israel in the Old Testament had promised that he would do something for his people, let's say he's gonna be with them in battle, be with them in war, and so on, to help them and to give them the victory. If they're calling on him and so on, then he's gonna be there to help them and to bring them out. And it doesn't happen, that would be a problem. Now we know sometimes they did lose because he already dealt with that, saying, if you're not keeping my commandments, basically you're not going to have my protection and so on and whatever. So, that just handles that. That makes sense. Because if you're not keeping the commandments and you're worshiping idols of the other nations and so on, then what do you expect of me? What do you want me to do? Just give you everything, like shower you with all the blessings and protect you from your enemies and so on, so you'll never change because you don't feel there's a need to change, right? But can you imagine the God of the Old Testament saying that verse in Matthew, right? Saying, if you ask anything, I'll give it, just unconditionally. It would have been strange sometimes, right? But since he already makes it clear that he'll protect them in battle and so on, and if you read Deuteronomy chapter 28, you see the blessings up to verse I think verse 15, 14, and then the rest of it in that chapter is the curses. But basically, if you look at the blessings part, they're going to be protected from the enemies, and they're going to be on top. They're going to have money, they're going to have riches, and they're going to be blessed and blah, blah, blah. But can you imagine? Let's pick a king, any king. Let's just, like David said, I'll look to the hills from whence comes my help and so on. We know sometimes these kings, they cried out in battle for the Most High when the enemy was up on them. Look like the enemy was about to take them out, and then the Most High helped them, right? And if you read scriptures like Psalm 48, that talks about though the earth shakes and trembles and whatever, will not fear and so on, right? Because basically our trust is in the Most High. He's going to be there for us to help us to bring us out of that. Now, let's just pick David, for example. He's going into battle, and he's looking to the hills, and he's crying out to the Most High, him and his men, for the Most High to help them because the enemy is gaining on them and whatever, right? And Israel has been doing fine. The king has been doing fine. Like David has been fine. Everything, they were all keeping the commandments properly. No false god or whatever, prior to this. And everything is fine. Keeping holy days, blah, blah, blah. Everything is nice. And they go to war. And they cry out along with the king to the Most High at a certain point, and he doesn't help them. And they start being slaughtered. And let's say David manages to escape with like 5 of his men. So half a dozen of them managed to escape with their life. But the others got slaughtered, killed, thousands of them. It's like that scripture there in that verse in the New Testament, if you ask anything, that Jesus said. Can you fit that into Old Testament right there? You think David and his men would have had any understanding as to why they together call on the Most High in a time of battle, and he didn't help them? That they kept their part of the deal to keep the commandments and the holy days and so on and whatever, and then it comes to him to keep his word now to protect them in battle because they're his people, his chosen seed, and he doesn't keep his part? Does that make any sense to you? So when you pray to Jesus and he doesn't help, after you've been praying in a Christian church and you've been fasting and you've been whatever, even as an Israelite, you're believing in Yeshua or whatever name you want to call him by, and you ask certain things, and you're still living in defeat, and he don't help you, does that make any sense to you? I mean, quick, let's talk about, well, brother, the victory is going to come later. He said if you ask anything, touching anything concerning, I will, right? You're going to get it. The Father's going to give it because you've asked it in my name. So stop hiding behind this, well, Jesus is going to come back and the victory is going to come and he's going to slaughter the Edomites and do whatever and blah, blah, blah. It's later on that victory is going to come. Like, come on, man. Just start to grow up. So it's like we're really blind with certain things in the Bible, because you can look at it and see that this Jesus is fake. That stuff doesn't happen that he promised. But if it's in the Old Testament, and if it doesn't happen with Jesus, Christians just overlook that, or believers in Jesus, whether you're Christians or Israelites, just overlook that and they just give Jesus a blind. Or we'll let him off that one. And they let him off year after year, year after year, year after year, even though they're bouncing checks, they can't pay their rent properly. They're losing their house, they're missing the car payments. They can't buy enough food. They're losing a job. They can't find a job they want. They might have a job and they're all right, but they need more, and they apply for a certain job and they're, oh, nice job, I'd like to have that job. They apply and they can't get the job. Job after job, they can't get it. That dream job they're applying for, they can't get that dream job, and so they keep doing the other job there. And this Jesus never answers to give them that dream job. When was the last time you went on a nice vacation, $10,000, $20,000 vacation? Are you going to ask Jesus for that and get that money to pay for that by tomorrow or by next week? Well, let me give you till next month. Can thousands of you, although I'm not at that place to have thousands of listeners yet, but can thousands of you come email me, whether you're Israelite or Christian, and say, yeah, I got a $20,000 vacation or $20,000 to purchase that nice vacation? Can you tell me that Jesus answered that prayer? Anything? Well, brother, you being fleshly and whatever. No, well, going on a vacation is a good part of life. It's restful, it's nice. And if you think I'm being vain, then what about the person who, for health reasons, need to get away and could really use that rest? Especially someplace where they can get lots of sun to help rejuvenate them and whatever, right? And just, So, yeah, I mean, stop letting Jesus off. The truth is right before your eyes, but you're just too blind to see that he's not doing the things he's promising in the New Testament. Now, in closing, picture these 5 men who escaped with David, saying to David, well, you said, we'll look to the hills, I'll look to the hills from whence comes my help. Well, we were crying out to the Most High, who is on high, and our help didn't come. Don't you think they'd have been wondering and asking him, what in the world happened back there on that battlefield? Our men are slaughtered. What do we say about this? What do we, to their wives back home and their children and whatever? You don't think they'd have been asking David what in the world went on there? What happened to the Most High? He's supposed to answer. And this Jesus, if he's really supposed to answer, just like Elijah. Oh man, let's look for that scripture with Elijah. Oh man, I'm telling you, we really need to think about these things here. All right, yeah, let's listen to this here with Elijah at Carmel to show you that your God should be answered, and if your God has a son called Jesus, then he should answer as well. He should give a response that's fitting to what's going on, to your request, since he promised it, right? Elijah, with the prophets of Baal and up on Mount Carmel, we know the story very well, right? And he's mocking them now because their God isn't answering. Let's look at 1 Kings chapter 18. Let's run down to about verse 26 and 27. Okay, so he's telling them to call on their God. The altar has been set up already and so on. And verse 26, and they took the bullock which was given them, and they dressed it and called on the name of Baal from morning even until noon, saying, O Baal, hear us. But there was no voice, nor any that answered. Doesn't that sound to you like no voice from this Jesus or no response from this Jesus when you ask certain things? And the deadline is coming. It's the 30th or 31st of the month. Deadline is coming. It's the 28th, 29th, and stuff is still bad. And no response from Jesus, no voice from Jesus, but there was no voice, nor any that answered, and they leaped upon the altar. See, the reason why I say it like that, with this no response from Jesus, is because you cannot just continue to be taught the same thing without one day stopping to question, why in the world doesn't this work? It's supposed to work. Stop letting them tell you just to have faith. One day it will happen. And they're saying in Jamaica, 1 day out of 7 and whatever, and to tell you keep. One preacher, when I was a small boy in Jamaica, he came, he preached, he said, if it doesn't happen now, wait 10 years. Right? And then 10 years come, if it doesn't happen, pray again another 10 years. I used to like that saying, and I used to tell people that. But that's just what they do. In this Christian stuff or this Jesus movement, whether the Israelite or in the Christian church, you just keep putting off things with faith with Jesus because that's all you can do with certain things that deal with Jesus, because he's not giving you the answers, right? Nor they answered, and nor any that answered, and they leaped upon the altar which was made. See, now they're losing it. They're getting frantic, like if they jump up there and show getting some kind of frenzy, like that might get them some attention from their God Baal. Or in this case from Jesus, like if you jump up on the chair in church or whatever, or if you do more fasting, or if you clap louder and whatever, or if you scream and pray louder, like they were screaming too, like that might get more attention from Jesus. Don't you get it? He's not answering. There's a reason why your Jesus isn't answering your prayers all these years. And the man you wanted still didn't stay in the house. Because your Jesus isn't answering your marriage prayers. You see, I got to bring it home to you in real life situations, because sometimes we just explain scripture so nicely and so neat and so properly that people don't connect with it enough until you start putting it where they live in their house. And that man praying to Jesus, and he still can't get to see his child. And that court case still doesn't go away, or doesn't turn out the way that you prayed that Jesus promised he would. Come on. Come to your senses. The stuff is right before your eyes, but you just isn't seeing it. The truth of it, that this is a big deception, but you just can't see it. So let's look at verse 27. And it came to pass at noon that Elijah mocked them and said, Cry aloud, for he is a god. Either he's talking or he is pursuing, or you see that he's talking or pursuing. Basically, it's not that he can't respond to you. You know, it's not that he might not want to respond to you because he cannot respond. He might be responding, but just be responding to somebody else. He's not that he doesn't have a voice. He's just got a voice for somebody else because he don't care about you. He's too busy, too occupied to give you a response. Or is it the case that that's just all mockery? That he will never respond because he cannot respond. You see that? For he's a god, either he's talking or he's pursuing, or he is in a journey, or peradventure he sleepeth and must be wakened. So they cried louder and so on, and cut themselves and whatever. Now, I mean, if he's to the point of mocking them and so on, like, please, just think for yourself that the truth is right in front of their eyes, that this sacrifice with the bullock and whatever, and this altar that's been set up that they're standing before and jumping and leaping on it, is all in vain. The truth is right in front of them that day after day, year after year, they've been offering to this Baal, and he's never, ever answered them. He doesn't answer, but they still want to do it in front of a bad prophet like Elijah. He doesn't answer. The same way year after year, your Jesus don't answer you. And the last time you bought that expensive shoes that you've been longing for so long, or that laptop, was because you did some overtime, or you got another job, or something like that. You see that? Come on, man. It's good that you got a job, though. And it's good that you did that overtime, because you wouldn't have that shoes or laptop. Alright? So they're mocking him, right? Either he's talking or whatever. So Elijah here is like, Elijah's mocking them because basically he's supposed to respond. So if these 5 guys now say to David, what in the world happened there? It's like Elijah questioning these guys, what's going on with your Baal? He's not answering. Shouldn't he be answering? So if the men that are with faithful men with David, these warriors, had to come to the point of asking David the same thing that Elijah is saying to them, you need to question your God like that, it would be a tragedy in Israel, in the legacy of Israel. If these 5 men who escaped with Elijah had to ask David why the other thousands of our men perished. And after David would have had to field questions like that, if he doesn't have any answers, because what answers can he give, don't you think he would have had to pass that question on to the prophet that told him, go fight, because the Most High said and confirmed that he's going to give you the victory? Do you think he would have had to go back to Nathan or to some prophet and say, what's going on here? My men are all over me. The Most High didn't respond, didn't answer. But you said that he told you he would and that he confirmed it with you as a prophet. You see that? Now the prophet's put in a bad situation. That's messing up all of Israel's obedience and faith and so on with the commandments. Because now people are going to start to wonder, why do we keep the commandments when this God is flaky and doesn't answer? We can't rely on him and so on. That's a big problem in Israel, right? You see, when you try to port over a New Testament verse like that into the Old Testament, it doesn't work. Because the God of Israel doesn't work like that. He doesn't slip up like that. My question today is, why is your New Testament belief slipping up? Your New Testament Jesus slipping up? Your New Testament Messiah slipping up like that? Maybe the truth is right before your eyes, but you just can't see it.